Okay, so I do have two different answers. Early childhood. So I'm Gen Z, right? I grew up with cell phones, I grew up with technology. But I didn't get my first smartphone until sixth grade. So I would say before the phone era, the main object that helped me throughout my childhood was this little green rock that my grandmother gave me. She called it a worry rock. And she basically said every time I was stressed out, every time I was scared, every time I was sad, every time I felt alone, frustrated, whatever, I could just rub the worry rock and put all of my worries into the worry rock. And I did that a lot. I don't remember how old I was when I lost the rock. But after technology, after I got my first smartphone, I would definitely say that a cellular device helped me throughout my tween years, my teen years, the rest of my childhood, up till now, honestly.
I would have to say TVs because as a kid, I never really got to see other people's creativity. So TVs kind of gave me an avenue into other people's perspectives and creativity and how they want to express themselves.
Yeah, so the first one, The Rock, absolutely allowed me to put my negative energy into something else. It's a practice that I still do today, not just with a rock, but, with crystals I absolutely could. As far as my phone goes, yeah. Today's modern world, our phones help us with everything. They can be as good as they can be bad, but mine helps me with communication, helps me stay in touch with all of my people, with my chosen family, so, yeah.
Well, since it kind of gave me a view of how people like to create, it kind of gave me the idea of to write and become a writer like later on in life. So I kind of consider that as an accomplishment in itself.
So yeah, kind of answer the same question. As far as the rock goes, like I said, I don't have the same rock, but I do use crystals, and I do use just personal items to me. Something as simple as a stuffed animal, honestly. You can just rub it and put that negative energy into it just to get it out of you. And yeah, as far as the phone goes, definitely not the same phone that I had when I was in the sixth grade, but it is the same device, so.
Yes, but nowadays I kind of use it for a more productivity type route, like editing and projecting things on the screen to try to kind of get my ideas flowing and stuff like that.
Anywhere. I can, it's as far as putting your energy into a rock or a crystal or a small object like that, you can take that with you anywhere, right? You can use that anywhere. No one's really going to question it. And the phone is the same thing. In today's world, everyone is constantly on their phone, so it's not really a questionable thing.
Most of the time and almost all the time it's gonna have to be my room because I've never really used it in any other space without feeling like people are judging what I'm watching or what I'm doing on my TV in some type of way.
There have been multiple times, recently more often than not, that I've seen a rock that looks very similar to the original one that my grandmother gave me. And it brings me peace. It's a little bittersweet, it's a little nostalgic, kind of homesick for a home I never had, but in that same hand it brings me a lot of peace. When I see my phone, there's no strong emotion that overbears one. It is just kind of dependent on whatever's going on that day.
It's more of a kind of serenity type feeling because growing up has kind of been another world for me. So instead of kind of being in reality, I was kind of able to kind of see a different world and kind of go into that rather than focusing on everything that's kind of happening in front of me.
Absolutely. And it wasn't even specifically just the object. I, for a lot of my life, felt misjudged using anything, doing anything that. For everything that you do, there's going to be somebody out there that is going to judge you for it. There's going to be somebody out there that's not going to approve, you know? And growing up is definitely, a part of growing up is realizing that that doesn't matter. For example, cell phones. You know, back in the day before I had an iPhone, I had an Android. And of course I felt judged for using it. Especially back in middle school, you know, when everyone's egos are on fire and you gotta have the best of the best. But it gets to a point where you realize it just doesn't matter.
The only times I ever feel misjudged using my object really was when I kind of used it for creativity, like writing wise, like getting ideas and editing my poems and stuff like that, because it's more of like a vulnerable thing and it gets really heavy in some points when I write.
So much. Everything around us can be considered technology, honestly. The Industrial Revolution skyrocketed us into a world that every little thing can be automated, right? You see behind me, I use my PC. It helps me for, you know, my hobby. It helps me for gaming. It helps me for media tech. It helps me for my community, right? But it can also help for work. It helps for scheduling. It helps for budgeting, you know? Same thing with my phone. Your phone is essentially a giant computer in the palm of your hand, you know? And we use technology every day, from the lights that we have to the floors that we walk on. So it really depends on what you consider technology to be.
Today, a computer mainly helps me the most, and I kind of use that in conjunction with the TV too, to just kind of like project things, and like I said, like more productivity type deals rather than just watching entertainment.
Absolutely. I don't like to label anything as bad, right? I think that no matter what happens in this lifetime, you can put it in a positive perspective. You can learn from it. And so it doesn't matter what kind of technology we have now, what kind of technology we're going to have in 5 years from now. It's going to help everybody, including myself.
Very much so, because instead of being kind of bound to what you can just see, you can actually do things on a computer that you just can't do on just a TV and whatever DVR or cassette player you really got.
I'd say positive. I'd say I have a positive reaction to pretty much everything these days, because I can see the value in the struggle, you know?
Today, yes, it's a toss-up between the two. He's on the good side. It's like, hey, you get connected and you get all these things just on your fingertips. Like anything you can really think of, you can kind of like be like, hey, I want to figure this out. You can really figure that out. But on the flip side, I kind of don't like the social media end, for the simple fact that it's kind of putting expectations and standards on people that really don't need those high standards or expectations at all. So I just don't kind of like the toxicity of social media within technology at all.
Well, if we didn't have cell phones or computers or anything like that, I don't think much would be different. I'd use pen and paper to write down the things that I write down on my notes app, or I would simply pick up a landline and call a friend, or if we didn't even have landlines, I'd go visit the friend, you know? Like I said, we as human beings can adapt to whatever situation we're in. So if we didn't have this technology, we'd be okay. But it definitely does help.
I would still be using a pen and paper and probably try to find somebody that would be able to publish my work and kind of go from there.
Right. So I definitely say one of the main positives, one of the main plus sides of today's technology is the communication we have, you know? The ability, think about TikTok, how quickly we can reach hundreds of people across the world, how quickly we can share information from one person to another. People you would have never met in your lifetime, you're seeing their opinion on things. And that can be amazing. That can be absolutely wonderful because we can get together, you know? We can emphasize our community better. We can reach one another and be there for one another. But in that same hand, seeing a little bit of everything all of the time, it can be very detrimental, you know? It could be detrimental toward our empathy. It could be detrimental toward our attention spans. You sit there and you scroll through a social media app and you see someone eating lunch with their friend. And then you scroll and you see a picture of a dog. And then you scroll and you see a funny meme. And then you scroll and you see a news article about how our president is essentially telling us that we're going to be stuck in the spider web of capitalism for the rest of our life, you know? And it's like you get whiplash. So, like all good things, I highly recommend regulation, moderation, balance. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
The object I used to use in my childhood, my TV, used to kind of lack the versatility that a computer has, but it also was the catalyst of my creativity and how I viewed how I can just make my art. But on the flip side, computers, they have all the versatility you have. It kind of thrives on versatility, but on easy use, it's kind of, you can't, it's not just easy to use. You just can't just use it and then know what you're doing.